Okay, welcome everyone to our breakout session talking about judging for our QT events as well as engineering portfolio and notebook. My name is Bob Meinhardt and I'm joined by Cindy Prestwood Chung. We're going to have this presentation for you about judging. Just a quick bio. I've been a judge ever since about 2012. So for about 8 or 9 seasons. I've been a judge advisor for a while, and I am a retired Cisco Systems, Rockwell Semi and Connexent and Compaq HP operations manager. I am joined by Cindy Prestwood Chung, who has been involved in FIRST for a long time. She was an FLL mentor, an FRC mentor, and she's been a judge for since 2010. Cindy is a program manager at EcoSense Lighting. So we're going to go ahead and get started. The first part of our presentation really is kind of general on kind of giving you some tips on how to win awards. And then we're going to follow up. Cindy's going to take over and discuss the engineering portfolio, engineering notebooks. And I know there's some questions this year, given our virtual events, as to how all that's going to work. One caveat, what we tell you here today is subject to change. This is FIRST is still figuring out how some of these things are going to work. So first of all, how do you win awards? You read the manual, read the game manual, do what's in the game manual, and then tell the judges about it. So that kind of boils down what it really takes. It's not really an oversimplification. It's really focused on these 3 things, and this is how you can have success even in the virtual world, okay? Award performance is a product, and I'll show you what that means here in just a minute. It's really sort of optimizing your work and your presentation, okay? So it's really a product. How well do you talk about what you're doing versus what you did? If you can talk about it, but your results are minimal, you're going to just have 1/2 of that product or that equation. If you have a great robot, do great, and you can't speak to it and kind of help the judges understand why what you're doing with your robot is so great, this is also not optimum. What you really want to strive for is a combination of the 2, and that's where this product comes in. It's how well you talk about the great things that you did, essentially. Okay. So some tips and tricks on judging. Some of you you veteran teams have seen some of this, but especially for the rookie teams, we encourage you to talk to other teams about why they're successful and how they win. We want you to encourage your coach, teacher, or mentor to become a judge. That's one of the best ways that a coach or a mentor can get involved in what happens behind the scenes at a tournament. And we obviously want you to get a good night's rest before the tournament, and even in the virtual world, before you're doing your matches, you want to make certain that you're getting rest. So the judging schedule in the virtual world will be a little bit different. We're going to be doing panel interviews that will be scheduled virtually during QT week. Teresa alluded to this, that some of the activities and your actual match play will be during the week prior to the QT date. We're going to have judging sessions with you. They won't be spread out through the entire week. They will probably be scheduled on 1 or 2 days during that week. The deliberations that the judges do will be done virtually during QT day in the morning and early afternoon. The concept of pit interviews is changing a little bit. The teams will be actually asked via a virtual tool like Zoom, not sure which tool it will be, but you will be scheduled for follow-up questions that are kind of in lieu of pit interviews. These are the typical follow-up questions that happen during the late morning and early afternoon of a tournament, okay? How we're going to do this exactly is to be determined, but the plan is to have a schedule where you will be contacted and asked additional questions. Final deliberations. Judges will meet virtually, given that we're having virtual tournaments, and then we will decide on the award winners on the day of the QT. How the timing of the QT day is going to work is still to be determined. So here are just some tips for you to be successful with your interviews. Be on time to your interview. It's going to be a virtually scheduled interview. It's going to be important that you're there because you're only going to have about a 15-minute window. It's still to be determined. Typically during a live event, we actually do a 10-minute interview and a 5-minute kind of pause. We're hearing that the sessions may be 15-minute sessions. We're still going to ask that you do a 5-minute presentation. And this can be a PowerPoint or Google slide presentation. The previous breakout session, someone asked if a video could be used, and we believe that that would be fine as well. Make certain that during the interview time, do some mock interviewing. And be prepared to answer the judge's questions that relate to your robot, the process you used for designing and building your robot, how do you divide responsibilities on your team, and other related items. And this is just to re-emphasize, make certain that team members are available on the day of the QT for the scheduled follow-up, whenever that is scheduled. So we liken winning awards to landing a job. The cover letter is your panel interview, kind of gets you an in-person interview, but it doesn't necessarily win you the awards. The pit interviews is where the judges get to learn a little bit more about what you guys are actually doing with your outreach, with your robots, and on your team. This is kind of like an in-person interview. The notebook is kind of your references. This slide here has been used for a little while. Cindy Chung, when she speaks to the engineering portfolio, is going to get into a little bit more detail on how this looks in the virtual world. So the actual judging panel, this is where you get shortlisted. The judges, after they interview you, will put you on a short list for certain awards that they think you're deserving of. But it's up to you to convince the judges that you're eligible and deserving of all the awards. Also, that you are approachable and fun to talk to. And really, kind of most importantly, are you stoked and excited about what you're doing in robotics and with your team and your robot specifically? So what's happening in the pit interviews? Even if it's virtual, based on the questions that you get from the judges that are talking to you, you can figure out what award they're talking to you about, and make certain that the right person is there to answer questions. If the right person's not there, hopefully there's a way of getting a hold of them quickly so that those questions can be answered. And again, make certain that one knowledgeable team member that has overall knowledge of your robot and your team and your process is available during that scheduled time. And I want to speak to just briefly about gracious professionalism. The judges use this as a kind of a baseline. It's assumed that gracious professionalism is there. If the judges learn that there is an egregious violation of gracious professionalism, this can still disqualify you from a virtual award. As to how that actually will be monitored and handled in the virtual world, we don't know exactly, but we just want to reemphasize how important this concept is for FIRST and for our region. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn over the presentation to my colleague Cindy Chung, and she's going to speak to what's going on in the engineering notebook and engineering portfolio world in our new virtual world. Cindy?
We don't have clarification on if this means 15 physical pages. That is 15 pages. Like the notebook, your team number must be on the front cover. This is a requirement. And the goal of the portfolio is to summarize and highlight your robot journey. This is basically telling the judges who you are, what, your robot. It's selling your team to the judges. So information must be clear and concise. There's some recommendations of what you can include in the portfolio. It's really up to the team on what they want to highlight, though, and that highlight should be what they are most proud of during their robot journey. Can you go to the next slide, please? So during our remote event, the engineering portfolio should be submitted electronically, and it must be in a single non-editable file, such as a PDF. You can have written portfolios that you scan in, but it's not preferred since they have to be electronic. Where you upload these to, that link will be provided later as we get closer to competition. If we switch over to a traditional event, the portfolio must be printed. So very much like a lot of teams that print their notebooks, this would be a printed portfolio. And you can have a written portfolio as well for traditional events. And then you would submit these portfolios, one, because it's required, two, because they'll be looked at for specific awards. Next slide. So I mentioned that the engineering notebook is not required. However, there will be some occasions where judges may want to get additional information beyond your panel interview, beyond your pit interviews, beyond your engineering portfolio. So during remote events, same thing, your engineering notebook should be one file, non-editable and electronic, and it will be uploaded to a particular remote site, and that will be identified to the teams if needed. Your notebook can be electronic or handwritten, but again, if it's a remote event, they'd have to be scanned. If we go back to traditional events, then a physical notebook can be available, and if it is, it should be in the team's pit area for judges to review. And like before, your notebook should include a one-page summary. That one-page summary points judges to certain areas of your notebook that you want them to focus on, so certain pages or certain sections, things like that. Next slide.
So I guess just concluding the content here, please make certain that you read the game manual carefully and do what it says to do. Also, please keep in mind, especially this year, be sure to check for updates to that manual. First is still, things are very much in a state of change right now. And I think First is doing everything that they can to keep up with that, but encourage you to stay up to date on what's happening with the manual. Awards, remember that awards are based on what you've done and how you present it. So it's not enough to just have a great robot that does well on the field. It's also not enough to just have a good presentation. It's really the product of the two that are going to lead to success. And remember, we've emphasized this a few times. I know this is a little bit redundant, but we just want to emphasize again, make certain that you have a team member available in the pits, I'm calling it in the pits, it'll be the virtual pits, to speak with judges during that scheduled time. Don't forget gracious professionalism at all times, and above all, have fun. So I think that's pretty much it. There are a couple of links here that we've added in. I think, Cindy, can you speak to this slide briefly?
Sure.
Cindy's
These are a couple of links up on the first to our first website where there's a lot of helpful information. It's the resource library where you'll find the game manuals, information on how to set up your fields, control awards, things like that. And then, of course, the LAFTC website, which will have a lot of information for the teams as well, especially as we learn more as the season goes along.
If you do have further questions, Cindy and I are putting our emails out here. If you do have a question as a team member, it's okay for you to email one of us. I want to, just as a reminder, please make certain that you copy your mentor on any kind of email that you send to either Cindy or I. This is a first requirement, and we need to make certain that you do that if you do choose to reach out to us. I think that's pretty much it for the presentation. I don't know if we don't really want to go through these other slides, I don't think, Cindy, do we? Or do we?
No, so we'll make this slide deck available for teams, and there's just a couple of slides following that Bob's showing that you can look at on your own. It's just additional information to help you. Again, all this is in the game manual as well. It's just summarized here in the slide deck.
Right. So the slide deck ultimately will be made available to the teams, correct? That's my understanding. Okay, so I'm going to actually stop sharing my screen at this point in time. Let's see here. And at this point in time, we can answer questions that you might have. Okay, what do we have? Cindy, it looks like we've got a few questions here, starting with Angela.
Yeah, so Angela asked if the maximum 15 pages for the portfolio is one-sided or back-to-back pages. We have to get clarification from first, so we don't have an answer for that at this time.
So if anyone has any questions, please feel free to post them in the question section, the judging notebook question section here, and we will use this time to answer as many questions as we can.
The engineering portfolio should be a team portfolio, so collective, one document.
Cindy, just for clarification, the engineering or the engineering portfolio actually replaces the notebook as a requirement, correct?
Yes, so instead of submitting a notebook as a requirement, the portfolio now gets submitted, and the portfolio is essentially a summary of what's in the notebook.
Now,
You can think of it as more of a
does that imply that a
selling
team
point.
has to have a notebook to do a engineering portfolio, or is that not necessarily true?
It's not mandatory for a team to have a notebook. However, the expectation is that teams would use some format for documenting their robot journey, especially when you're doing engineering design. There is also the possibility that judges will ask for additional information beyond the portfolio. And in that case, your engineering notebook would be helpful to have. What I can say is for teams that typically are used to doing entry notebooks, if you continue to do that, you should be able to easily create your portfolio based off of an entry notebook that already exists.
That's just, I guess it's interesting, Cindy. I mean, we don't have to be too philosophical here, I guess. But I think for a rookie team or a new team coming in, this is sort of an interesting dynamic because they're being told they need to do this 15-page thing. It's just kind of interesting if FIRST decides to change back to a notebook requirement that it would be, yeah, it just could be an interesting kind of development, going forward.
Yeah, and that kind of goes along the lines of Andrew's question. I don't know if this is going to be a permanent change, but I know that just from my own experience, the notebooks are quite complex and can be difficult to go through for the judges. So having a portfolio that summarizes the best aspects, the best features, best content from the notebook in a 15-page document is much easier to read through and try to understand who the team is, what is their robot doing, what are the unique aspects of those robot, outreach, things like that. But I will say that trying to create this portfolio without having any kind of documentation can be pretty challenging. So I would expect that teams will still use some format of documenting.
Right, right. That makes sense.
Melanie, there's no recommended amount of pages for each section if you're referring to the notebook, but I think it really will depend on the team. So the team really should think about, as you're working together, what makes most sense for you in terms of communicating information, because you will probably have meetings where certain team members cannot be there. And being able to document your information in a well organized type of format makes it very helpful for all team members to go back and reference information. I do not know. Bob, do you know for Angela's question regarding scrimmages?
To the best of my knowledge, Cindy, they would not be required during scrimmages, but
Just
I
Q2.
think that's something we're going to have to get some clarity on. If, to give a definitive answer, I believe the answer is no, but
Okay.
During judging interview or pit interview, will students be able to stream video to show or demo their robots? Um, I would say that question, that needs to be taken as an action question to get back to you on that, Andrew. I don't think we have answers on that right now. My first inclination would be that it would be okay, but it's something we need to get back to you on.
Are you asking if pages can be changed in the portfolio once it's been submitted? Can you clarify your question?
To answer Caitlin's question, they will be held at two separate times. So the judging interview and the quote pit follow-up will not be at the same time. It will be two separate times.
We'll go back and get clarification, but when for the QT, you'll be submitting your portfolio. I don't think we have enough information at this time on whether or not changes can be made, but when you have QT, your portfolio will have information all the way up to that point of your robot season. So, obviously, if you go on to other competitions, you will continue to work on your robot, so you'll have more information, such as more meeting entries if you're using journals, or, changes to your robot design or outreach or things like that. And then Priscilla, just kind of in a nutshell, the engineering portfolio is now required, and it replaces the notebook. It's a summary that highlights the best content aspects of your robot journey. So, anything that you would put in the notebook that the team is most proud of, maybe it's your robot design and certain aspect of your robot, you would want to highlight in that portfolio. If your team is working on outreach and they're really proud of that, plus a component of their robot, you basically want to include everything that the team is proud of, and also to let the judges get a feel of who are you, who's your team, what makes up your team, why are you a team, what does your robot do, things like that.
I think to answer Corey's question, what makes an impactful team presentation, I think is practice, making certain that there's been some mock run-throughs, and that can be done using another team maybe, or using a mentor. So I think practicing your judging panel interview prior to that scheduled time is one of the best things that you can do. And make certain that you have a presentation ready. Have that 5-minute presentation, whether it's slides and or videos. Make certain that you're ready to present your team in the best light.
Corey, I think too, I might add to that. I kind of think of it as like an interview. So, the team's coming in and they're interviewing and they're basically trying to sell their robot. Not necessarily sell it because it's great, but really all the hard work that the team's put into it. So being able to demonstrate who the team, again, kind of like with the portfolio, but who the team is, what their robot does, any kind of special features of the robot or something unique about the team. I think that's what makes great presentations.
Any other questions, anyone? We've got a little bit of time still scheduled here, so we're more than happy to answer any other questions you might have while we have a little more time here. And the answer to that is that yes, the presentation will be made available. I don't know exactly how. Cindy, do you know how it will be made available? Will it be on the LAFTC website, or do you know?
Yeah, I don't know at this time. It'll either be available on the website or an announcement will go out with the link to all of the workshop presentations. Also, any of the workshops that are recording their sessions, I believe those recordings will be available as well.
That's a good point, Corey. Robot Tuesday is an excellent resource. Okay. Last call for questions here. Does anyone have any other questions they'd like us to try to answer? If you do have any questions, please start typing them in now. Okay, I guess that's a wrap. Thank you everyone for your attention and joining us for our breakout session on judging and the engineering portfolio and notebook. We do appreciate you joining us, and we wish you a very successful season with robotics this year, and make certain that you keep up with everything that's going on. We will have that follow-up kickoff, and any kind of changes will be reported at that point in time. Thanks very much, and Abigail, I think we can close the recording or stop the recording now.